Welcome to 101. I'm Greg Bassey, your host from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. It's a big day here. We've got the first guest that we ever had on this show many years ago, Senator Mary Beth Carozza. Welcome.
I'm really glad to be back, Greg. I was thinking about, as I prepared for today and thinking back on our past interviews, and there's always so much to cover.
You're not traumatized by our past interviews? Most people were traumatized after they leave here.
Well, I go back and look at what we did together, and I think we pretty much cover the waterfront. So I'm always prepared when I come in.
Well, I've known Mary Beth for 45 years, sort of,
Probably,
on and off.
Probably.
That's a long time, and here we are still hanging out.
Different hats, but here we are.
Very different hats. So we have you on this time of year every year to preview what's going on in the General Assembly. The General Assembly session starts when?
January 12th is opening day.
Okay, so that's very soon. And this is an election year General Assembly, which I, as a cynical reporter type guy, like to say that it's like a foo-foo General Assembly session. There's not usually a lot of controversy because everyone wants to get reelected.
Well, first of all, for starters, what was really different this year is that we had the special session in December. So, normally in the interim, we can spend our time moving around our district. And as you know, I cover 3 counties, Wycomico, Somerset, Worcester. But this was a little bit different because we had to take a whole week out in December, a very intense week where we were dealing with redistricting on the congressional lines. And now we'll go back, special session wrapped up. We'll go back to regular 2022 session on January 12th. And of course, we'll be dealing with redistricting for the regular state lines, as well as our normal constitutional responsibilities of passing a balanced budget and the other priorities that we need to do during our session. And of course, with more fanfare, given the fact that, as you noted, it is an election year.
Right. Now let's talk about congressional redistricting a little bit because you were pretty vocal about that this time. And you've got a great congressional history, having worked on Capitol Hill and everything. You know this stuff probably better than most people. But historically, this has happened forever. I remember when they drew Wayne Gilchrist in '92 into the district with Tom McMillan to try to get rid of Wayne. Then they put Wayne and your mentor, your friend Bobby Ehrlich, in the same district together to try to get rid of one of them. Bobby paid them back by running for governor and winning. And now they've messed around with Andy Harris a little bit. So this sort of seems to be the tradition, but there was a lot of opposition to that.
So let's give it a little context. And I know, Greg, you know this going back to Capitol Hill days, but there was a point when there was actually a 4-4 split in the Maryland congressional delegation. What we mean by a 4-4 split is 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans. Then in the course of redistricting, that went from 6-2, which probably, may be more in line of where Maryland is, a little bit to the left of center overall. And then, of course, with the last process, not this process, going to 7-1, with Maryland becoming one of the most gerrymandered, if not the most gerrymandered state in the union. And, it comes down to fundamental fairness, because when you look at that, 7-1. So we had an opportunity with the approach that Governor Hogan took, a citizens commission. He decided not as a governor to draw his own map, which most governors in the past have always done.
Right.
He set up a citizens commission. They held, all of these hearings around the state. They had 4,000 people engaged in this process, plus all the written testimony. And it really was a fair process. And they came up with a map that was more reflective of the makeup of the state of Maryland. On the other hand, we had then a legislative committee that was established that only had 2 Republicans on it, held very few public hearings, and when they held them, not much of a turnout at all. And they kind of quietly did their work without really all the public scrutiny that we should have in redistricting. And they moved forward with a congressional map that basically tried to move it to an 8-0 makeup of 8 Democrats and 0 Republicans. And I have to tell you, being on the Senate floor and, we tried to debate the map with the other side. they didn't stand up and defend it.
They were having none of it.
No, they took the approach. We have the votes. We don't need to defend this, and we pointed out what the fact that the Citizens Commission map received an A+ from one of the good government groups, and that the legislative map received an F. We just pointed out fundamental fairness and to listen to the people of Maryland. And normally in a debate on the Senate, you have the back and forth. The Republicans will stand up, and then the Democrats will go, and then there'll be that back and forth. In this case, Republicans stood up. We pointed out all the flaws with the legislative map. We pointed to the good work done with the Citizens Commission, and the Democrats did not defend their own map. So as predicted, the legislative map was passed because they had the sheer numbers. Governor Hogan vetoed that congressional map, and then they quickly overrode the governor's veto. And now it's in the courts. As a matter of fact, we now are seeing the first lawsuits filed against the congressional map drawn by the legislature. So, it's just a very disappointing, frustrating process to go through that when you know that we had an opportunity to rise above it and just make it a little bit more balanced. I'm not talking about that we can go back to 4-4, but certainly looking at a 6-2, which is more reflective of the state of Maryland, it's just fair for the people of Maryland.
Well, I think it used to be 4-4 for a lot of reasons, but when I learned contemporary issues in civics, in the 1970s, District 1 was an issues district. So you had Southern Maryland in with the Eastern Shore, and there was a lot of commonality there. We had watermen in Southern Maryland, farmers in Southern Maryland. The counties were the same size in terms of an urban and farm population, rural population. But the issues were the same. So you could be on armed services with Patuxent. You could be on agriculture, the committee as a House member with agriculture, the watermen issues, dredging issues. So it was an issues thing. It wasn't a political thing. And now it's all about politics.
Right, and the reason that so many of us on the Eastern Shore objected to the lines of the 1st Congressional District is that the new lines take us across the Bay Bridge into the suburbs of Anne Arundel County, so it becomes now a Anne Arundel County suburbs dominant district as opposed to an Eastern Shore dominant district. That hurts us. And when you said about the common issues, well, some of the rural areas that they took out of the new map, even though they were rural areas, but they were in Hartford and Baltimore County, actually have more similarities to the shore than the suburbs of Anne Arundel County, where they're going to have the numbers and the domination. So it is not a good district for the Eastern Shore. It's why so many of us stood up and protested not only the overall map, but specifically for the 1st Congressional District and the negative impact that has on the Eastern Shore.
Now, when you'll get back, you're going to talk about your own districts. And of course, I understand why the numbers are the way they are, but it's always bothered me that so much of Wycomico County is in that 37th district with Addie Eckert as the representative now, the state senator, your counterpart. You guys get along great. You work as a great team. There aren't any issues with that. But it's always bothered me that Wycomico County is sort of split in half on that.
So I think in the new lines, and we're still really going through that I will pick up a little bit more of Wycomico County, and I welcome that. Both Senator Eckert and I have always taken the approach, if you represent part of a county, you represent the county. So from that standpoint, that working relationship will continue regardless of what the split might be. But I certainly do welcome representing more Wycomico County. But the concerns I have of the overall map, not just my district, and this is what I think we have to take the higher road and look at that. There's a tendency for the Democrats to plus up and increase the already Republican areas. And then for the Democrat areas, they go with the lowest common number so they can protect the number of seats. It's unfair. It's unfair to the people of Maryland because what that means for a district like mine, if they decide to, plus that up, well, I'm already, when we have something like, let's say, a pandemic, that means I have more constituents to do casework for, and also I need to cover geographically more of an area. So it's fundamentally unfair to the people because you're not having the even numbers that you should have if their mindset is, well, okay, we're going to take take the already, quote, Republican districts and plus them up. And then we're going to take the lowest common number for the Democrat districts, so then we can keep the Democrats in those districts, instead of actually, you would probably, in some cases, combine those. So again, you look at the fact that when you have gerrymandered maps, it means, in essence, you are cheating, and you are cheating the people of Maryland.
I saw that you filed for re-election, and it just shows our difference in personalities. You filed on December 7th, which for me is one of the darkest days in American history, but you interpret that day as a great day, not a great day, but a day where we were all able to unify and show how great a nation we were on December 7th from our reaction. But why would you file for re-election on December 7th?
Well, it was two reasons. One is with COVID, you now have to make appointments to file.
Okay.
So number one, that's a different process. Before,
And no one else wanted to file that day.
Before you could just decide that, whenever you could just walk in and file.
Right.
And now you had to make your appointments. So I did make my appointment on December 7th. And part of it was a reflective process. I did make the decision to file for re-election, and while that might not be a newsbreaker for your viewers, I point out that it's a life-changing commitment, because I am basically making a commitment to serve another 4+ years, because we have the 22 campaign coming up, and if I'm successful, that's another 4-year commitment. And to make that commitment of the level that I believe I bring to the job with my work ethic and the integrity. So for me, it's a life-changing decision to make that. And one of the reasons, after prayer and talking to my family and to some of my key supporters, I really believe right now we're fighting for the very soul of the shore and the state of Maryland and even our country, and that I have an obligation to do my part. And also, I represent the best district in the state of Maryland. I am so humbled to represent it. And the diversity of this district, when you think about, our commercial watermen, our farmers, our small business operators, the healthcare leaders here, our schools. I represent all 3 of our higher education institutions, Warwick, UMES, and Salisbury University. So, I look at that, and I'm very blessed to represent it, but I also really understand the responsibility I have in that representation. And so when I made the decision to file for re-election, part of it was to say, I will continue to fight the good fight, and certainly Pearl Harbor Day was a reason to remember fighting the good fight.
That's terrific. It really is. Your committee, you're also on a really important committee in the Senate, where a lot of business flows through across your table.
So I will most likely remain on the Senate Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee. That committee receives more bills for review and consideration than any other committee in the entire Maryland General Assembly. I often call it my hardship committee assignment. But it's really important to the shore. So you think about that: education, health, and environmental affairs, plus, in addition, veterans issues, issues with municipalities, issues with elections, issues with ethics. So it really covers that. And you think about those 3 broad areas: education, health, and environmental affairs, and the district that I represent, taking the time in preparation during the interim and the upcoming session. I've had a chance to meet with the leaders in each of the 3 counties to talk about what has COVID meant on educating our students. What do they need in light of the negative impact that COVID has had? Everything from some of the academic loss to the social and mental health aspects of it. And so I had the opportunity to meet with some of the leadership. And as a result of some of these meetings, I encourage them to specifically state, what are your immediate challenges right now that you can flag for us before we go into session? And that meeting, specifically the one, Lou Taylor is the Worcester County Superintendent, but he's also now the president of the Maryland Eastern Shore Education Consortium with Dr. John Andes as executive director. And what they did as a result of this back and forth and having candid conversations of how COVID has impacted our students, they have come forward with a letter that they have just sent to the governor and to the leadership, Senate President Ferguson and House Speaker Adrian Jones, and outlines 3 specific requests. One dealing with if there was a loss of enrollment because of COVID, hold that harmless and don't let that affect their funding, 1. 2, they specifically looked at areas where they believe they need additional support. Areas like programs that benefit those English learners, the ones receiving reduced meals, and special education students, that looking at plus-ups in those areas. And then 3, which is something that I have continued to push on, is giving them more flexibility in the timelines for the Kerwin commitments. They're basically saying, look, you need to give us more time to implement to basically build out and implement our local plans. So in all 3 of those areas, I have already let the governor know that, and the leadership of the Maryland General Assembly, that, that these requests coming from the Eastern Shore Consortium, that I'm fully supporting those. And again, knowing that those issues will come through my committee, we've done a lot of good work even before the session has started.
You mentioned the governor. You're obviously very close to the governor. Governor's going to go away here at the end of the year. We'll get a new governor. How's that shaping up? What's that going to do to your life in the General Assembly?
Well, first of all, it's allowed for some reflection when I look at the fact that Larry Hogan, before he was governor, we served together in Governor Ehrlich's administration, and so there was he's been both a colleague and a friend. And then when I look at his time as governor and think of the challenges that he has faced as governor, from the Baltimore riots and how he handled that, to his cancer diagnosis, which I think to this day many people don't know just how serious,
right,
stage 4, and the fact that he truly is a survivor and how that impacted his governance, to never predicting or being able to see that he had to be a governor over COVID. You remember before COVID struck, we were on a strong path of, economic development, the, fiscal responsibility, his leadership on the opioid crisis, and all of those tracks were really strong. And then COVID hits and you have to change everything. And he had to make some tough decisions, and I believe he made the best decisions he could based on the information he had at that time. I also give him credit, Governor Hogan credit, that during the recovery he made some adjustments and said, okay, we need to now start focusing on recovery. And of course, we're still living with COVID right now and the variants of that. And so this governor has done a tremendous job of leading the state of Maryland. And I want to see that in this last year, I still believe that he will have some legacy projects, legislative initiatives that I want to be part of, partnering with him on those. And I also believe that he's laid groundwork that no matter who the next governor might be, that these legacy priorities, we can continue to work on them. And I certainly plan to do that because he has prioritized the Eastern Shore. And I certainly have appreciated that, and I know that my constituents have appreciated that. So we take advantage of his last year in office, and we look to see what are some of the legacy initiatives that I certainly will continue to work on in the future.
I have to ask you, we're both very emotionally connected to the U.S. Capitol building, the anniversary of the January 6th things coming up. For me, still, that's a very personal thing. I know I should look at it as a reporter guy, but having worked in that building, you did too. Any reflections on that as we approach that anniversary?
Sure. I think we have friends, we have members of Congress, we have staff that we all know that were, in the Capitol at that point. And, I think, as, I've said in the past that, of course, you condemn any type of violence. And so, from that standpoint, you want to make sure that, number one, it never happens again. And I put the responsibility on everybody. Number one, when you're in leadership, when you're in the Speaker of the House, when you're the Senate President, when you have interaction with the Capitol Police, how can you make sure that a situation like that never occurs again? So I have reflected on this because when we think about situations in the past, we try to learn from them. And I believe that we need to make sure that we have protocols and policies in place at a leadership level. And I talk about the leadership of both the House and the Senate at the federal level, as well as the Capitol Police. And I believe that we can make sure something like that never happens again.
Yeah, it's so personal because when we were there, we all knew Capitol Police officers, and you develop relationships with these people, and it's beyond professional. It's you really admire what they're trying to do and achieve, and how they're trying to keep you safe. So to see them attacked is just so bizarre.
Right, and I think that I remember the situation when I was working on Capitol Hill, and we had one of our Capitol Hill police officers killed. Back then.
And they stormed Tom DeLay's office.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so when you think back then, and I remember just the emotional impact of that, and then of course, what happened on January 6th. Again, I have always believed that you need to give our law enforcement all the tools and support and resources they need to do their job, because in the end, any of us that are involved in public service, whether it's at the municipal, county, state, or federal level, job number one is public safety. And so I will continue at all levels to support our law enforcement.
You were in the Pentagon on September 11th when it was attacked, when the plane crashed. You're working there in the Defense Department for Donald Rumsfeld as a liaison to Capitol Hill. So you were in that building when it was attacked. So you have experience with being in a building that's under attack, basically. But to me, that's like a military target. I don't feel like I don't get as emotional about that. But the United States Capitol building really, instills emotion in me.
Right, and so reflecting back on September 11th, at that point when we were attacked, all you want to do is your small piece of it. What can you do to reassure Americans that everything that can be done is being done to protect the safety of the United States of America. And I didn't realize it then, as you're going through that day, and just trying to do your small part of assisting, that it had the impact that public service then became my life's dedication. I didn't realize it then, but it clearly, when your very way of life is attacked, and you realize that what you're doing is so much bigger than yourself, that in my own way, I now look back and realize that my life would always be committed to public service.
Very bad transition here, but the biggest news right now in Ocean City is one that we all should have seen coming. But I wonder what your emotions are based as I am, and you have no idea what I'm about to say. But the closing of Phillips Crab House, my goodness.
Have been reflecting on that. As a matter of fact, just visited recently with John Knorr, who's a senior official with Phillips, and we were talking about that, and so of course that's also literally right in my neighborhood.
You live right across the street.
The Crab House.
Yeah.
So a lot of mixed emotion there, and if anything, as I was reflecting on it and talking to others, was actually having a conversation with John Fager about it, because of course Fager's is one of the legacy restaurants, family restaurants, and I said, and the whole, Fager's Island, and they had Bad Monkey.
Well, the Bad Monkeys, he's really expanded, yeah.
So the reason I'm working this into the question is that I said to John, this is even more important because his sons are very interested in carrying on the family business of whether it's running Fager's or Bad Monkey or the Atlantic Hotel. And I said, when you see that Phillips Crab House will be no more, I'm saying, will this prompt you to double down even more and make sure your business continues in the family, or the Harrison Group, that continues, or the Trimpers? So I look at it, and because I'm so blessed to represent these family businesses, that I want to let them know I will do whatever I can, support whatever policies, fight off whatever policies that may hurt these family businesses, because this is our legacy. So yes, it's been emotional, but if anything, I think some of us are going to double down and make sure that these Ocean City family businesses continue far into the future.
How is Ocean City doing economically? How are you feeling about it? What are some of the issues that are hitting there that are unique?
So the good news is we actually had some of our local restaurants have one of the best summers ever. And they compare not to 2020, they go back and compare to 2019 when they had a good summer then. So that's the good news. Where I think we have to be extremely cautious is that COVID will have a long-term economic recovery tied to it. And I'm really not convinced that my colleagues across the bridge really understand the long-term aspects of economic recovery. And what that means is you should not be moving forward with proposals, mandates, regulations that are going to affect these businesses as they're trying to come out of COVID-19. So I really look at my job is to continue to educate my colleagues in the Maryland General Assembly on the impact of any proposals and what that may mean on the long-term economic recovery, not only of the businesses that I represent on the shore, but across the state of Maryland.
Well, we want to wish you really good luck as the Assembly session starts up here in January. How can people reach out to you and kind of unload their minds on you?
So, of course, they can go to my website, marybethcarozza.com. And I encourage my constituents to let me know their views. I certainly really made the rounds in all three counties during the interim. As a matter of fact, my Patriot Jeep has over 211,000 miles on it, so I am making the rounds. But it's really important that I hear from my constituents during session. And I will encourage them to come up because we will not be completely shut down. There might be some restrictions and other protocols, but I do encourage those constituents who can and are interested in coming up to do so. There's no substitute for that. And I can tell you, being in these hearings or on the Senate floor, when you know your constituents, are in that hearing room or, are in the chamber, that really is very inspiring and very uplifting for us who are up there fighting the good fight for the Eastern Shore. And
you'll accept our invitation to come back in April and talk about everything that happened back when the weather will be warm again.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
She's Mary Beth Carozza. She's our state senator, District 38, up in Annapolis, representing us. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Greg.
I'm Greg Bassett from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. Another edition of 101 right here on PAC 14.
First Shore Federal is proud to support PAC 14 and one-on-one. We'd encourage every business to support PAC 14 and pick a program and support it, and let's make a difference.